Greetings, members, one and all of the Salivation Nation. Silver's Summer of Slumping. Let's explore. Last summer, most of us remember how silver had rallied to over $25 an ounce. It was quite a time to see, especially when we saw it dip down to under $12 back in March. Of course, it was an unusual year. We were in the midst of a pandemic, and there was a lot of liquidity being injected into the monetary system from the Federal Reserve, and almost all of the politicians were all about printing that money and sending out stimulus checks, relief packages galore. And it's something that, we're still in the midst of to a point, but this year is a little different. And I think there's something that I think that we can take away from the difference from this year and last year. And this is why I believe we're, in a sense, in terms of precious metals, and especially silver, we may be in the doldrums for this couple of months here before we see prices start to pick up again, at least at any noticeable and substantial level. Remember, it wasn't after the summer we did see the prices did scoot on up there to almost $30 an ounce. In fact, I think some reports we may have touched on it very briefly for a time. And I made a prediction earlier in the year that I think we could see silver, at least for a time, touch that same level again, $30, and maybe even get up to $35. I stand behind that prediction even now. But usually in the summertime, well, things tend to kind of wane a bit. People aren't quite as interested, and it is a different year this year than it was last year. I recently saw an interview on Kitco News about this, and they were talking about how essentially, there's a lot of things different this year than last year. We are starting to round the curve, so to speak, as far as the pandemic is concerned. The vaccines are out, and cases are down, save for several places, based off these new variants that are out there. But essentially, the virus is not going to have the impact that it had last year and earlier this year. But we will see the impact, I believe, of a couple of different factors that really may not kick in until the third quarter. In fact, some people think that in October is where we're going to really see some movement, as a lot of these numbers will start to kick in and reality will set in terms of, well, we've had the summer to recover. There's been a lot of economic activity, but yet this is happening here. There's other indicators as far as GDP and as far as employment numbers and all that may cause the metals to really start to go up during that time, especially when we start to realize the cost, the sheer cost, the economic cost of all of these relief packages and infrastructure spending and the like, and other avenues that government wants to take to bring us further into debt. There will be a psychological impact of the $30 trillion debt. We haven't seen it yet, but we know what's going to be there. The money's already allocated. In fact, they still have not spent all of the money from the first relief packages. Go figure. So what about this shiny white metal? What's going to happen with it? Well, I believe the silver squeeze movement that we saw early on, towards the end of January into February, and really it's not let up a whole lot. Well, this message is for you guys, because essentially, what's it going to mean if we're not seeing much movement in the spot price of silver? Premiums are still high. There's a lot of motivation for silver squeezers to literally put pressure on hedge fund managers, the COMEX, and the LBMA. We did see what I think should be referred to as a scandal with the LBMA in terms of their inaccurate reporting of how much silver they had on hand. And really, we've not heard anything about that since then. I believe really there literally should be an investigation as to what happened there, because those were those reports really did affect the markets. And I believe that there should be an investigation on that, and who knows what could come out from that, if anything at all. Regardless, some people may be discouraged that there wasn't any movement, or a whole lot of movement, or notable movement in the spot price, and there's and then there's other factors that have come into play too. Obviously, the COMEX is still moving on. There's a lot of silver that goes in and out of the COMEX, and it was a thought that maybe there could be some effect on the COMEX, LBMA holders of silver, the big banks out there, JP Morgan and the like. Those are big elephants in the room. Very difficult to have much impact there. And so I would encourage anybody who had that motivation in terms of accumulation of silver for that time, and as you still continue to accumulate, to do so with maybe shifting a little bit of focus to make it a little bit more personal, because we are in a season of slumping, and I think that will potentially be the case all summer long. But I want to encourage you in this regard, and that is with silver hanging out at about $26 an ounce, and though we have seen it come down from 27, 28, again, go back and look at my old videos. We were celebrating like crazy when it hit $25 an ounce. So really, silver has done well, all things considered. It has not gone to the moon. It's not skyrocketed. But really, in a sense, we don't want that to happen. Why? Because typically, if something skyrockets like that, typically it can plunge just as very quickly. What goes up must come down, at least to a point. But there is something about what precious metals do, and that is they preserve their value. So in terms of price performance over the long period of time, well, it's like a floating balloon. And that just keeps on rising, and it gets lighter as the helium is in there to cause it to rise up. And although the balloon is a bad analogy because we talk about a bubble bursting, but I think a balloon is a little different than a bubble. There's a little more strength there in that balloon. And if you think about what wealth preservation is over the long course of time, typically it does defeat the failures of fiat. And that is really what we're dealing with here, is the failures of fiat. As these notes, these Federal Reserve notes are designed essentially to, well, I won't say fail, but to devalue in terms of its value over the long course of time. We know that each year the Federal Reserve targets 2% inflation, and we know it has been surpassing that for the last few quarters, and who knows what the kind of measures are going to come next time that the CPI numbers come out. So therefore, we know that this is a depreciating asset here, the dollar, and fiat is really, in a sense, because of that, it is doomed to failure in one form or another. Now, what method will it take, or what? How will it be reinstituted is the other thing. They'll call it another dollar, but essentially the dollar will be reformed. It'll be reborn. This will essentially die, and we'll get a new dollar in its place. Kind of essentially what happened with the Zimbabwe dollars. And so that is what we can look forward to. Even though the dollar, the United States dollar, is the world reserve currency, eventually it's got to fail. It's got to give. We'll give in to some sort of reset, and there'll be a revaluation of everything, including silver, at that time. What that revaluation will look like, well, I've talked about it on a previous video that was relatively controversial on the surface anyway, until you understood what I was talking about, and that is essentially it could be revalued to be actually cheaper, because the dollar will be revalued at a new level to give it a new confidence, and people feel like, okay, this new dollar is worth a whole lot more, a heck of a lot more, maybe maybe twice as much or 3 times as much as the old dollar, giving it this aura of strength, although it is an illusion of strength, because you know what they say about these dollar bills, fiat designation is kind of the ghost of real money, and real money is gold and silver. But I want to encourage you guys, if we see, and again, I'm somewhat making a prediction here that silver will have a summer of slumping due to some of these things. I think we're going to hear some good and bad information. The psychological aspect of it will take root in the marketplace, and I believe that psychological interpretation of market data will essentially mean that silver kind of may run stagnant through the summer, maybe even go down a little bit. But I believe before the end of the year, we'll see it kind of scoot back up a bit and go up and maybe even touch $30. I'm kind of shying away a little bit from the $35, which is the upper end of my prediction from earlier in the year. But I do believe we may see it tap into the $30 level. We'll find out. But that's kind of where we're at. The silver summer of slumping will eventually come to an end. And I want to encourage you to keep on holding on. And if not, find buying opportunities as you can afford and stack on. So there you have it. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I want to encourage you to please rate, hit that little notification bell so that you can be apprised of the latest video. Share this video with all of your friends, including your great-grandmothers. I'm really looking for the great-grandmother market out there for my videos. If you could do that, that would be spectacular. Share it, comment, and subscribe.